February 2026. The Strait of Hormuz. An Iranian tanker turns back from the mouth of the Gulf. The U.S. naval blockade has effectively sealed the world's most critical oil choke point. Within a week, Tehran's grain silos began running low. The country's food supply, heavily dependent on imports that once transited the strait, faced an immediate crisis. But Iran had a backup route that Western strategists had long dismissed as a secondary artery. The Caspian Sea, a landlocked body of water bordered by Russia, Iran, and 3 other regional states, sits beyond the reach of the U.S. Navy. In the spring of 2026, this inland sea became Iran's wartime lifeline. The rerouting began quietly. Container ships that once sailed south toward the Persian Gulf were redirected north to Iran's Caspian ports of Bandar Anzali and Amirabad. Wheat shipments from Russia and Kazakhstan started arriving by rail and vessel across the Caspian's eastern shore. Corn, edible oils, and medical supplies followed the same path. The transformation was rapid. By April, 4 Iranian Caspian ports were operating at full capacity around the clock. Dock workers shifted from seasonal schedules to continuous 3-shift rotations. Warehouses that had stood half-empty for years filled with bagged grain and palletized cargo. The volume of goods moving through this northern corridor grew by 98% in the first 4 months of 2026 compared to the same period the previous year. The Trans-Caspian International Transport Route, a network of railways, ferries, and port facilities linking Central Asia to Europe, suddenly carried more than 5 times the freight it had 7 years earlier. Container traffic on this middle corridor doubled in May alone. Iranian customs officials waived standard inspection protocols for what they termed emergency humanitarian cargo. In practice, the distinction between food and military supplies blurred almost immediately. Russian vessels began arriving at Bandar Anzali with holds that carried sealed crates labeled as agricultural machinery. Western intelligence agencies later identified these crates as drone components. The Shahed 136 and Mohajer 6 drones, both manufactured with Russian-supplied guidance systems and engine parts, were being reassembled at Iranian facilities near the Caspian coast. The components traveled across the sea from Russian ports such as Makhachkala and Astrakhan, where they had been transported by rail from factories deep inside Russia. The Caspian Sea provided a sanctuary that no U.S. aircraft carrier could penetrate. International maritime law designates the Caspian as a lake rather than a sea, which complicates any foreign naval intervention. Russia's Caspian Flotilla, based at Astrakhan, patrols these waters with corvettes and missile boats. Iran's own naval forces operate from the port of Bandar Anzali. Neither fleet has faced a significant Western challenge since the blockade began. This absence of naval pressure allowed the corridor to function with an efficiency that surprised even its architects. Cargo ships crossed the Caspian in daily rotations, their hulls loaded with a mix of sanctioned and legal goods. Iranian shipping companies registered new vessels under Kazakh flags to avoid detection. The insurance market adapted as well. Lloyd's of London had effectively stopped underwriting vessels that called at Iranian ports, but Russian and Chinese insurers stepped into the gap. Premiums rose, but they remained lower than the cost of losing an entire cargo to a naval interdiction. The rerouting had an immediate effect on Iranian domestic prices. Wheat flour, which had spiked by 40% in February, stabilized by May. Bread subsidies resumed in major cities. The regime in Tehran could point to the Caspian corridor as proof that the blockade would not break the country. But the corridor did more than just feed the population. It sustained the military logistics that Iran's allies in the region depended on. Houthi forces in Yemen, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and proxy militias in Syria all relied on Iranian-supplied missiles and drones. Those weapons now traveled overland from Iran's Caspian ports to its western borders, then across Iraq and Syria, a route that bypassed the sealed Strait of Hormuz entirely. The United States and Israel had anticipated a naval siege, but had not fully prepared for the scale of the Caspian workaround. By June 2026, satellite imagery showed a dramatic increase in truck traffic along the Rasht-Astara railway line, a key link in the north-south transport corridor. Russian rail cars carrying grain from the Volga region crossed into Iran at the Astara border station. The grain was unloaded directly into Iranian silos near the Caspian coast, then distributed to bakeries across the country. The entire system operated with minimal friction because Russia and Iran had signed a series of trade agreements in 2025 that streamlined customs procedures. Those agreements, once viewed as routine diplomatic paperwork, now underpinned Iran's survival. Western analysts began revising their assessments. The Caspian corridor was no longer a temporary workaround. It was becoming a permanent infrastructure of war. The United States imposed secondary sanctions on companies that used the corridor, but enforcement proved difficult. Many of the vessels flew flags of convenience from countries that had not joined the sanctions regime. The cargo manifests listed goods that were technically exempt from sanctions under humanitarian carve-outs. Wheat and corn are not prohibited items, even when they free up domestic resources for military production. The legal gray area allowed the corridor to expand, while Washington struggled to find a response. Then, in July, the corridor became a target. Ukrainian long-range drones, operating with intelligence support from NATO allies, struck a Russian rail ferry at the port of Makhachkala. The ferry had been carrying a load of Iranian drone components bound for Russian forces in Ukraine. The strike did not sink the vessel, but it damaged the loading cranes and disrupted operations for 2 weeks. Ukrainian officials claimed the attack had successfully interrupted the military logistics chain between Iran and Russia. For the first time, the Caspian corridor was no longer a sanctuary, it was a front line. Subsequent strikes targeted railway bridges and fuel depots along the corridor's western edge. Iranian air defenses were repositioned to cover the Caspian coast, but they lacked the coverage to protect the entire shipping lane. Commercial vessels began to avoid the northern end of the route, clustering near the Iranian shore, where surface-to-air missile batteries provided some cover. The shift reduced capacity, but did not stop the flow. By August 2026, the corridor was carrying roughly 40% of Iran's non-oil imports. That share was projected to grow if the blockade continued. Iranian officials issued a statement that the Strait of Hormuz would remain closed until the United States met a list of demands that included the lifting of all sanctions and a commitment to renegotiate the nuclear agreement. Iraqi oil experts consulted by regional media predicted a closure of up to 1 year. A full year without Hormuz would force a permanent restructuring of Iran's supply chains. The Caspian corridor, built in haste, would have to sustain an entire economy for 12 months. Russia had its own reasons to keep the corridor open. The route allowed Moscow to bypass the Black Sea, where Ukrainian drones had repeatedly struck Russian naval assets. The Caspian offered a secure backdoor for moving military cargo to the Middle East and on to Africa. Russian grain exports, which had been hampered by the collapse of the Black Sea Grain Initiative, found a new outlet through Iranian ports. The commercial marriage between the two countries deepened with each passing month. Joint ventures were announced for a new rail link along the Caspian's eastern coast. Port modernization projects received funding from Russian state banks. The infrastructure was being built not for months, but for years. The question for Western strategists was no longer whether the corridor could be shut down, but whether it could be outcompeted. The United States considered a naval presence in the Caspian, but the legal status of the sea made that prospect almost impossible. Turkmenistan and Azerbaijan, both bordering the Caspian, had refused to allow foreign warships into the basin. The only viable military option was targeted strikes, which risked escalating a conflict that Washington had tried to contain. The blockade of Hormuz had already raised global oil prices to over $120 per barrel. A direct strike on the Caspian corridor would send prices higher. The economic calculus argued against escalation, so the corridor continued to operate day and night, through fog and summer heat. Cargo ships moved in predictable patterns. Truck convoys rolled along highways that were now guarded by Iranian Revolutionary Guard units. The rhythm of the corridor became a fact of life, as ordinary as the sunrise over the Alborz Mountains. The rerouting of wheat and corn had saved Iran from famine, but it had also locked the country into an ever deeper dependency on Russia. Iranian sovereignty over its own supply chain had effectively been outsourced to its northern neighbor. The drone components that arrived from Russia gave Iran a replenished arsenal, but they also made Iran a direct combatant in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Ukrainian strikes on the corridor were, in effect, strikes on Iranian soil. The boundary between the European war and the Middle Eastern conflict had been erased. The corridor had merged two battlefields into one. By the late summer of 2026, the Caspian Sea had transformed from a quiet backwater into the most contested body of water in Eurasia. Its surface carried grain for hungry cities and circuit boards for flying bombs. Its ports handled the lifeblood of a sanctioned regime and the sinews of a Russian war effort. The Strait of Hormuz remained closed, but Iran was still standing. The corridor had delivered what the blockade had tried to deny, and the world had learned that a sea without a navy can still become the most dangerous place on the map. The clock on the corridor had not stopped, and the attacks were only growing.